Thank you for being here. And I always start off by saying thank you for being here because after 17 years of not speaking, those are the first words that I said. I was in Washington, D.C. on the 20th anniversary of Earth Day, and was a gathering much like this, except my parents were in the audience, and I said those words, and my mother, who's being my mother and hadn't heard me for 17 years speaking, she jumped up and she said, "Hallelujah, Johnny's talking." And my dad, who was just a little bit different than my mom, he looked at me and he said, "That's one." and because he always wanted me not only to speak, but to ride in cars. And he followed me across the United States, telling me that after each degree that I would get, I would be in Oregon, and my dad would be there for my graduation, and he would say, "Listen, we're really proud of you, son, but you're going to have to ride in cars and talk. What are you going to do with a bachelor's degree?" And he followed me to Montana, where I got my master's, and he said, "Look, I don't want you to think that we're not proud of you. We really are, but what are you going to do with a master's degree in environmental studies when you don't ride in cars and talk?" And he followed me right up to the University of Wisconsin when I was there at the Gaylord Nelson Institute for Environmental Studies. And he showed up and he looked around at where I was and said, "My sister said maybe I should leave you alone because you seem to be doing a lot better when you're not saying anything." That's my dad. And so when I said those words, "Thank you for being here," I was saying it because, if there's no one there to hear you speak, then there's no one there to receive a message. And after 17 years of not speaking, I learned that really listening was an important part of communication. And I hadn't been listening, which is when I stopped speaking, is why I continued to keep my mouth shut. I used to listen just enough to think that I knew what the other person was going to say. And I would stop listening when I figured that out. And then I would start thinking about what I was going to say back to show them that I knew more, that I was smarter, that they were wrong, and all kinds of strange things like that for an insecure person like me that just kept me flapping away. Now, when I first said those words, "Thank you for being here," I kind of turned around and looked to see who was saying that, because I hadn't heard myself in such a long time that I didn't recognize my voice. And then I turned back around and realizing that that was me. And I sort of chuckled to myself, and my dad saw me, and he said, "Yeah, I can see, he really is crazy. Look at him up there laughing." And that's because my dad was a different kind of guy, that's right. But and I just want to talk a little bit about my journey, why I stopped riding in cars, because I saw an oil spill, and it affected me in such a way, and I know here we've been talking about the spill in the Gulf, and one of the things that really affected me about this spill was, besides seeing all the dying birds and mammals and things like that, was the smell. And I think one of our first speakers talked about the smell, and I was like going, "Oh my God, that's right. Empty an oil can and pour that in your garage, and then some gasoline, and then just a propane tank. Let that open up just for..." And it was just that kind of impact that I couldn't get away from as we turned around and went back up the coast. The stench of the oil spill was just still with us, and it just kind of permeated everything. And it wasn't like you could turn the page on a newspaper and get away from it. And I wanted to do something right away. I wanted to get out of my car and start walking. And my girlfriend, she said, "John, you can't do that, because we don't have any money. Without money, people are going to see us walking, and they're going to say, 'Look at those poor people.' They don't even have enough money to ride in a car or take a bus or anything like that." But she said, if we had lots of money, then people would look at us and they would see us and they'd go, oh, look at the rich people. They're walking. They must know something. Yeah, this was way before Forrest Gump, see. And so I decided I would wait for the money to come, and it was a friend's death that really convinced me. It was a deputy sheriff in our town who was always digging around in Jean's garden looking for certain plants. This is in the 70s, so I don't have to go any more in that. But in a small town, he had a boating accident and he died. And we were really shaken by that. And so we picked some peas from our garden and we went to the neighbor's, his mother, and we gave the peas and we said, we're so sorry for your loss. And we went for a walk to celebrate his life. And it was on that walk that I realized that, you know, here was someone my age. He was about 26 years old. He was married. He had a beautiful family, a house with a white picket fence around. He was white. He was living the American dream, and he had everything. And just like that, he was gone. And so it made me think that, you know, we only have right now. We only have this moment to do the thing that we think we need to do. And so I told my girlfriend, I said, I'm going to just keep on walking. And Jean, she looked up at me, and, you know, and she, love in her heart, and she said, bye. Well, she didn't really say that, and she was saying bye only to say that she couldn't do that. She had other things going on, and so I could do that, and that's what I did. I started walking, and I walked for a while, and the first thing I did was call my parents and tell them that I was walking on the phone. Mom, yes, I'm walking now because of the oil spill. Oh, there were 2 tankers that collided. Yeah, I've given up riding in cars. My dad wants to know why I didn't do this when I was 16. I didn't know about the environment then. But, I mean, that's the kind of reaction I would get from my parents. And from the people in my community, I got arguments. And arguments because the argument was, John, one person can't make a difference. One person is not going to change anything. And I thought maybe they might be right. And I would argue with them. And it was then that I decided my birthday was coming up. I was turning 27. I've been listening to a lot of Beatles, number 9, number 9, number 9, and that numerology. And this is the 70s and that weed growing in the yard there. So I decided I had to do something, and that was to not speak for one day. And so I didn't speak for one day, and I started learning so much. And like I said, the first thing I learned was I had stopped listening. And the next thing I learned, it took 2 to argue. And the other thing that it really came to me was that it was very difficult to lie. And these are really wonderful things for me, and I decided that I was going to not speak for a whole year, and then I would revisit this on my birthday, and that birthday kept going and going until 17 years had gone by before I started speaking again. And I spoke on the 20th anniversary of Earth Day here in Washington, D.C., because I wanted to be reminded that I was going to speak for the environment now. And I had walked across the country and got my degree and had a Ph.D. now, and I wrote on Exxon, on oil spills, right when Exxon Valdez happened. And the only person in the United States studying oil spills at a Ph.D. level when Exxon happened. And of course, my dissertation was in great demand, and people from the government were calling me, what do you mean he doesn't talk? And so you don't have to talk to get your point across, is what I'm saying. And so I did start speaking in Washington, D.C., and my mother did jump up and say that, you know, hallelujah, and my dad said that's one. But I went to work later. I finished my dissertation, defended over the telephone. I went to work for Oil Pollution Act of 1990 staff as an environmental analyst. They came and asked me to come to Washington. I was up in, I guess, Vermont at the time, and they said, well, we'll send a ticket for you to take a plane. And I said, well, I don't actually fly in planes. I mean, luckily I could talk, right? And they said, well, you can take a train, Dr. Francis, and we'll reimburse you. And I said, actually, I don't take trains. And then the guy, long, pregnant, paused, right? And he says, Dr. Francis, you don't ride in cars, do you? And I said, no, I don't, you know, and I could see everything fly away, that dream of working for the government. And the next day they called and they said, our boss said, we have to have you here. How can you get here? And I said, well, I could ride my bicycle. I said, and how long will that take? And I said, about 2 months. We'll be waiting. So I called my dad. I said, Dad, I'm working for the Coast Guard now. He goes, yeah, what Coast Guard? I said, the U.S. Coast Guard. He says, oh, well, do they know who you are? I said, yeah, I guess. He says, well, who do they think you are? He says, I don't know, Dr. Francis? He said, the world certainly has changed. And the world had changed. I mean, it really had changed from when I started out and by the time I got to the East Coast, because environment had become something. And as I got to the Coast Guard, and I started doing my work there, and I let me do things like ride my bicycle up to Philadelphia with a commander riding his bicycle with me to do tanker inspections. Oil companies are going, so Dr. Francis is on his way up on his bicycle. What do you mean? And he says, what? He doesn't ride in cars because of an oil spill? And he's regulating our industry? God, don't let 60 Minutes. Don't let 60 Minutes show up there with him. He might have a little spill, and you know how they blow things out of proportion. And so I did. I would go up to Philadelphia. I'd get on the oil tankers, and I would sit with the oil executives. And after a while, they noticed that I didn't have horns going out of my ears or anything in my head. They said, so what's this thing about not riding in cars? And I said, well, actually, it's because I want to take some of the responsibility of an oil spill that happened back in 1971, and so that's why I do this. And he goes, you want to take responsibility? I said, some of it. You guys have a lot of responsibility, but I want to take some of it. I think we all share in that responsibility. He said, you know, I think you're somebody that we can work with. I go, well, okay, but I'm still regulating your industry. And there are things that we're going to have to talk about and we're going to have to do. And it was I just want to say this was a great journey that I was on. If someone had said to me, John, listen, if you want to make a difference, get out of your car, pick up a banjo, go ahead, and just walk east. You're going to make a difference, buddy. Oh yeah, and shut up too. You're going to really make a difference. Well, that would have been I said, you better stay off of that weed stuff, buddy. But that's what happened, and that's the miracle of our journey. Whenever there's an oil spill now, all my friends call me. I get emails from all over the place, and people are saying, John, we're so sorry for you. And I know that this spill is beyond any spill that we've ever had. And we don't know what's going to happen. We really don't, and there's going to be things that are going to come up that are going to be surprising to all of us. But I can say one thing, is that we're going to have to do something. This is our moment. Just like the moment in 1969 when the big blowout happened in Santa Barbara, that was only maybe 3 million gallons. It propelled us into the environmental movement and the first Earth Day. But this is something that is much, much more, it's a catastrophic environmental event. I don't know what else to say. And I think we're going to find out that we're going to have to change our lives. One of the things is that I hear a lot of people wanting to get rid of offshore oil, and you're going to hear my voice along with that. But I want to know, and I want to ask the question, what are we going to do about it? What are we going to do in our lives to make that a possibility? Because if we just say that, and then we go back to doing what we do, it's not going to happen. So I'm inviting us to change our lifestyle, but not to just change our lifestyle and say, you know, it's really hard for us to walk and come. I don't think everyone's going to give up riding in automobiles, and I'm not going to do it right now myself. But there are a lot of things we can do that are going to conserve energy, that we're going to look at alternative, developing alternative energy, that we're going to do some legislation, because we're going to ask the government, hey, listen, you guys, you're subsidizing the oil industry. You're subsidizing steel mills, steel industry, railroads. Why can't you subsidize individuals and communities that are making a change, that are doing different things? And I just want to say, that's the kind of action that we need. I'm going to spend the rest of my life, getting beyond who's to blame, because I know there's a lot of that to go around. There's enough for everyone. And as I said, the oil companies have the greater preponderance of it. But we have such responsibility and such a power that we can really make a big difference. Right here today, I'm going to say, listen, please use me as anything if we can make this change happen in this planet. Because what I did learn walking across the country when I didn't speak and listening to all of us was that, yes, pollution is a problem, loss of species, habitat, all those things are a problem. But the most important thing is that people are the environment. And if we're part of the environment, then the environment is human rights and civil rights and economic equity and gender equality and all the ways we relate to one another. And so it's really about how we treat each other when we meet each other. And when we do that, when we treat each other with respect and love and dignity and not oppression and exploitation and all the other ways, we're going to find that what goes through the environment, what goes through us and goes into the environment is going to help mitigate a lot of those problems. But what's going through it right now is exactly oppression, exploitation, and those kinds of things, and that greed that propels us into this environment where we have such spills like this. And so I just want to invite you all to use me as a vehicle, use yourselves, use the organizations that you belong to, and I'm going to be around until I can't be around anymore, and I'm going to be part of the change. So thank you very much.